Okay, fantastic. All right, welcome back. So today's lesson is going to be on labor patterns. We're going to talk about labor patterns that are producing and pushing a baby out, and labor patterns that have unseen or hidden production. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is the labor pattern that everybody considers to be the pattern you get before you call the midwife or before you go to the hospital. And as a future midwife, this is the pattern we watch for to say whether or not we get up and go to someone's house. I'm going to teach you when that's appropriate and when it's not appropriate, when to obey it, when to not obey it. And that is today's class. And we're going to add a little bit in there of watch your wording. Like, how are we going to communicate with these women to have their bodies not feel like failures? To let them know that there's a process that we just don't understand all the time, and how to effectively communicate that without seeming like we're not educated. Okay, so here we go. So to start with what is normal or what the textbooks say, that's what we're going to start. That's the labor pattern we're going to start with. So 5 minutes apart, lasting 1 minute long for at least 1 hour. And a contraction is the entire uterus. So if a woman is getting a contraction on half the side and not the other, we need to encourage her to get into a position, hands and knees, do a little butt jiggle, arch her back, drop her belly, to do all of these things. Can you see me in this, in the camera?
Yeah, but the kids are calling.
My kids are calling?
It says kids phone.
Okay, just ignore them, they'll be fine. I don't know if that's coming up on the screen or not. Probably for them.
I don't know.
It's okay, don't worry about it. Okay, so guys, we're recording from the phone today. So there's going to be a little bit of technical difficulties that happen once in a while, and that's okay. We're going to move through those because life has those interruptions. And as a midwife, you're going to have to deal with those interruptions on a regular basis, deal with them powerfully, and move forward as if they didn't occur. Okay, so that's what we're going to do now. So contractions 5 minutes apart, lasting 1 minute long for at least 1 hour. If this is a primip, and that's a word you're going to need to know on a regular basis, a primip is a first-time birthing woman. I also consider that some VBACs, women that have never birthed vaginally, to have some qualities of a primip, especially if they've never had labor contractions before. Those women will act and behave very similar to a primip. Okay? This rule is most women will 5 minutes apart, lasting 1 minute for an hour long. If a woman has had no contractions whatsoever, everything okay? Okay.
Yeah, they were calling me.
Okay. So if a woman is having contractions and they start off at 5 minutes apart, and they last 45 seconds long, and she does this, we're going to give it time. If contractions that start at 2 or 3 minutes apart and don't kind of like weighing down, those typically are vaginal labor or unseen or hidden productive labor. Okay, so in other words, we'll get into that in a minute, but those are not typically contractions that produce a baby. Those are typically contractions that are going to fade out with some rest and some fluids and a little bit of time. And we're going to talk about this over and over. So don't worry if you don't get everything right now. We're going to repeat ourselves throughout this program, especially during case studies, because I'm going to go through the number of times that we've had prodromal labor. And that's another word you're going to have to know because the rest of the world is using that. And I'm going to use the word prodromal labor or unseen production interchangeably because they mean the same thing. Prodromal labor is labor that starts and stops and starts and stops and starts and stops. I don't like the term prodromal because it makes it seem like it's false labor or not real. And I want to get rid of that wording because it's not that it's false labor or not real. It's just doing things that we aren't capable of measuring or seeing. Like it's ripening. It's ripening the cervix. It's ripening the baby. It's positioning. So it's positioning your hips. It's opening your hips up. It's positioning the baby. It's getting the baby's shoulders lined up. It's getting the baby's head lined up properly. It's strengthening the uterus. and it's preparing you. It's loosening all those tendons and ligaments that hold you together. So prodromal labor or false labor is not false or prodromal. It's just doing something that we can't measure. Okay. This labor, the 5, give me a second here because I feel like I've gone too fast, and I'm going to have to slow myself down several times during this program because I'm so used to the material and I'm used to teaching other people it so many times that I have a tendency to speed right through. So if you've ever found that I've sped through something and you need more clarification, feel free. I encourage you to message me. Therefore, I can go back and make sure that everyone else got it too. Because if you're missing something because I went too fast or I wasn't complete enough, I would almost guarantee someone else is missing it too. Okay, so let's start off with just a case study. So this particular mom, she was told by a friend on the internet that if she drank red raspberry leaf tea and black cohosh, that she would be able to put herself into labor and she would have her baby before 40 weeks. She was very excited. But she didn't let me know that she was doing this. So I would get a call every night. Gwen, I'm having contractions. They're 5 minutes apart and they're lasting 45 seconds. I say, oh, when the hell are you having them? Oh, they started about 20 minutes ago. To a midwife, that should be a red flag. Contractions typically start with 30 minutes apart. Then they drop down to 20 minutes apart, then 10 minutes apart. Then we get 8 minutes apart, 6 minutes apart, then 5 minutes apart. If a labor starts 5 minutes apart, 4 minutes apart, 3 minutes apart, it's not typically true labor, especially for a woman that's only had 1 or 2 babies. Now, when you're talking about a woman like myself that's had a lot of babies, we're just too busy with our other kids to notice we're having them all day. But if you ask me, I'd be like, oh yeah, I've kind of been, I think I've been having them off and on all day. That's a different story. Okay, so we're going to talk about that real quick. So in this particular case study, this went on for 3 weeks. And I got her the birth kit extra early, and we were just sure this baby was going to come out at 38 weeks. There was no chance this baby was going to stay in there that long. And then after about 3 weeks of this, she says to me, do you think I should stop the red raspberry leaf tea at night before I go to bed? He's like, yeah. So basically she was taking herbs that were causing these contractions, and the contractions weren't doing anything at all. And does the herb help? Yeah, it does. It strengthens the uterus, but it strengthens the uterus by causing it to have contractions. And you can't count one as the other, which will be a whole different conversation about trying to induce with herbs. It's still an induction if the body's not ready, it won't work. And usually you just annoy yourself half to death for weeks and weeks at a time. And then when it's time to have the baby, then you birth. We'll have that conversation under the heading of inductions, home inductions, and the safety of inductions. Okay, but to continue here, she ended up having these contractions off and on, off and on. So I finally said, would you just stop that, please? This woman carried to 42 weeks and 4 days. And the whole last 5 weeks of her pregnancy, no contractions, none, just nothing. It was actually the herbs that were causing the contractions of her prodromal labor. So when someone's coming to you for prodromal labor or is repetitively going to labor every night but it stops in a few hours, you really need to ask the question, what are you taking? Are you doing something to initiate these contractions? And if that's the case, you have a responsibility to inform them that forcing your body to do something before it's ready to do has consequences. And they need to have an awareness of that so that they have a full and conformed consent even on their own behaviors. Okay, so this rule is pretty steadfast. The exemptions to this rule are going to be grand mal tips. A mal tip is someone who's had more than 1 child. A grand mal tip is someone who's had 4, 5, 6 babies. I'm a great grand mal tip. I've given birth even more than 5 times. And great grand mal tips, we don't obey any of the rules at all. And they'll pretty much throw the textbooks out for us. We'll just let you know we're in labor and 4 contractions later, there'll be a baby. But now I want to touch on a little bit about language, okay? I don't like the term false labor at all. So we're going to get rid of the term false labor. There's no such thing as false labor, okay? You're either in labor or you're not in labor. And we need to be, as future midwives and as midwives and caregivers, providers of any kind, we need to be very specific with women and be brave enough to say, I'm sorry, honey, I don't feel like this is true labor, okay? I feel like these things over here are actually occurring. I do feel like it's productive. There's production going on. They're not useless. However, to push out a baby, the contractions need to be over a minute long. Even for great grand mal tips, the contractions have to last over a minute long. Okay? So we need to be watchful of our words, get rid of the word productive or non-productive in this particular case. The problem with labeling somebody as non-productive is then they have this idea, this view of their own body as not producing something that it's supposed to be doing. We want to be careful that we're not putting that over there on that person, okay? And some of the women will push you. What do you mean? This, I'm sure. Okay, comfort them and say, I understand. This is frustrating. And we'll talk about mirroring somebody or how to acknowledge somebody's spoken to you or has a concern in another video, because that's a whole long conversation we need to have. But this is what it would look like in this conversation. I got it. Every night you have contractions and nothing occurs. So what do you think that means for you? And would you consider that when you get excited that you're going into labor, that your hormones of excitement might be overriding the hormones of labor? Okay. Would you also consider that maybe relaxing and letting what's going to happen might actually produce or get us closer to this pattern? Okay. So the contractions are working. So let go of the contractions aren't working. They're just doing this. So we're going to say these are productive contractions. They are working, but this is what we're currently working on right now. We're not working on the baby pusher side of things right now. Okay. So this is just a brief overview of labor patterns. We'll kind of go through what the books teach, but I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of case studies that don't follow the books. I had a woman this year in her mid-30s, first time baby, first time mom, primate. She delivered in 57 minutes. So she never got to lasting 1 minute long for 1 hour. She delivered in 57 minutes. How did I know that this was not, the 511 rule was not for her? Because her signposts were different. Okay. So her signposts were, that was it. As soon as she started vomiting, I knew it was time to get there. One way or the other, my presence was needed. And in this case, it did produce a baby. But if it didn't produce a baby, then my presence was needed to help her calm down and get out of that cycle. Okay. So we'll talk more about labor signposts in another video. We'll talk more about watching our language and making sure we're supported. And we'll also talk about the psychological benefits of mirroring somebody or actually acknowledging somebody and having them feel like that you heard what they said and what they intended to say. All right. Bye, guys. That's a lesson for now.